to Gegenpressing, the Bundesliga podcast. I'm Manu. He is Stefan Bienkowski. This is the first main show of the 2025-2026 Bundesliga season. Sounds like a sci-fi movie. No, but it is really the year 2025. We are really going to go into the year 2026. Somehow mankind hasn't blown itself up. I'm baffled by that more than anything else. Stefan, I'm excited. We get to preview this upcoming season. We're going to do it a little bit differently than we usually do, which is going to be fun. But before we do this, first of all, how's it going? And second, how are we going to do this?
Yeah, I'm doing very well. I'm a little more flustered than I'd like to be. I scheduled this to go out in we gave ourselves a good 50 minutes to start this because we're doing it live for anyone who's
Yeah.
listening as a podcast afterwards. And for some reason, my camera just didn't work, so that's why we're recording this a
Mhm.
little 2 or 3 minutes late. That's why I'm also sweating profusely because I was being stressed out for the last 10 minutes. But besides that, I'm good, mate. It's good to be back doing the main show. We've been obviously
Yeah.
been doing the bonus shows through the summer for our paid subscribers on YouTube and Substack, doing the transfer roundup shows. And yeah, we thought we'd kick off the season with something a bit fun.
Hmm.
Now, I'll get on to the template or the format of the show, and I do appreciate people who are listening to this on their iPhones or their Android phones. Won't be able to enjoy the visual spectacle of this unless you're watching on Spotify, I suppose. But rest assured, there's really not much to it. We decided to do what the kids these days call an S tier ranking system thing.
Hmm.
S at the top, don't know why, but it's above
Super.
A apparently. That's what the kids say.
We can't
Um,
use the other tier that a lot of kids use because, like, for a German podcast, it's very inappropriate.
yeah, and so it's also worth pointing out from the very start here. We are not ranking the squads in terms of the best squads in the division. This
Mhm.
isn't a case of saying, Bayern are top, Dortmund, Leverkusen, etc., and then the relegation teams at the bottom. We're basically going through every team's squad and giving them a ranking, or actually a grade is probably a better way to describe it,
Mhm.
based on how the squad is compared to last season, how they've done in the summer transfer window, etc., etc. So it's not really about who has the best squad. It's not top to bottom, strongest squad to bottom squad. It is who has improved their squad the most this season, who has or the summer, who has lost the most players and look weaker this
Mhm.
season. Um, and we'll try and we'll try and have some fun with it and see how we go on with it, Manu.
Yeah, yeah, that sounds great. I see you have the list of clubs already on there in the bottom. For those again who can't see this, we have a second screen kind of set up where we do the ranking. And my first question was where are we going to start, but I think the it's kind of done it for us with the
It
two teams that
has.
start with one, Erster FC Heidenheim and Erster FC Köln, so and Erster FC Union Berlin. So I guess semi-alphabetic, considering that they have not numbers in their names, is
I
how we're
think
gonna
it
do this.
might be alphabetic. Yeah, it might
Yes,
be because obviously a lot of the German clubs have
yeah,
obviously
have
numbers
one.
that start their names.
Yeah,
But yeah, we can start off with Heidenheim.
yeah, I'm
Um,
happy to start with Heiden.
so I'll quickly go through. I've got a list of transfers that the clubs have done. Obviously, we're recording this 10th August, so
Yeah.
um, a lot can still happen, particularly with the bigger clubs when we get to them. But as things stand, Heidenheim have brought two players in on loan. They brought in
Hmm.
a goalkeeper from Dortmund, Ramaj, and they've also brought in Bayern Munich's Arjen Ibrahimovic. Um, they've lost Christopher Nagel to Unterhaching. Sorry, he left on free transfer. Iker left out a goalkeeper who left, and they've also Thor Kalf left as he retired. But of course, Kradzik and Paul Vanner, who were two Bayern Munich loanees who returned to
Hmm.
Bayern Munich this summer. Where do we want to put Heidenheim, Manu? They're probably actually the worst team to start off with in terms of trying to judge players, trying to judge squads here because
Hmm.
I feel like Heidenheim more than any are a club who are better than the sum of their parts because the MVP in that squad is of course the head coach.
Yeah, and it's a really hard one, right? Because like I covered them quite a bit towards the tail end of the season last year when they were in the relegation playoffs. Got to see them there. Last minute, last minute, last second winner to fight off relegation. And I think that last year maybe the season was worse than it could have been because of the European football aspect that hurt small clubs, really small clubs like Heidenheim the most. And so, as you mentioned, that they're usually bigger than the sum of their parts. They lost a couple players like Wanner, of course, going back to Bayern Munich. Ibrahimovic is a really interesting player. Ramac is a really interesting player. And Jan Ramac has played for Heidenheim in the past. Is a really good goalkeeper. Dortmund have sort of him on the books in case some Kobel gets sold, right? He's like kind of slotted in as a replacement in case they needed him. Ibrahimovic, great talent from Bayern Munich, only 19. I guess they had a good experience with Paul Wanner there last year, so they want to repeat that. But there's not a lot else done, right? And we've seen already that the squad was very thin at times last year. And I also think that the Bundesliga has gotten better with the teams that have come up, Köln and Hamburg, right? Hamburg, when we get to them, they have done a lot of business already. I think they're taking this very serious, and so you're already slotting down a spot. It's not quite enough for me, Stefan, at this point, and knowing, of course, that the limitations that the Heidenheim has, like they're not a club with a lot of money. They are a club that relegation isn't the end of the world. They're probably already longer in the Bundesliga than they anticipated. But if this is it today, I don't know. Maybe I wouldn't rank it too high. Like a D is where I come out at the moment.
Yeah. I think the interesting thing about Heidenheim is that they obviously had a perfectly good squad last season, but
Yeah.
it was scuppered by obviously European football, and that's something they really struggled with.
Mm,
Um, and I guess the way they're just kind of looking at this is like it's very easy to see that Ibrahimovic is the kind of Paul Vanner replacement. It's a like for like replacement.
yeah.
Swapped one Bayern youngster for another, really there. But I completely agree with you. They haven't really done a huge amount. They've lost a few players, obviously, and it just kind of feels like Heidenheim things like Schmidt obviously kind of famously, I think he says this every season, but
Yeah.
he certainly said it this summer after the previous season. He's like, I'm going on holiday for 3 months. I'll see you guys in August. So it feels like the recruitment team did that as well. So
Yeah.
I think I'd probably be content with a D as well here. Again, that's not to say they're going to get relegated. That's not to say they're going to win the Bundesliga. That's just to say they haven't really done anything. But they also haven't really lost any key players. No, obviously Paul Vanner's a big name, but he wasn't really. I wouldn't say he was actually a key player in that squad. He was used kind of all over the place. He was a bit of a handyman. It'd be great to see Ibrahimovic kind of get that role and get some game time and see what we can do in the Bundesliga. But shall we agree on a D here?
Yeah, I think D is fair, with the caveat that they're probably going to do a lot of late shopping.
Cool. All right, cool. Well, D it is. Moving on to FC Köln. Club who obviously got promoted from the Bundesliga, Zweite Bundesliga, sorry. A club, Manu, who have probably been pulled apart this summer. Obviously, Damien Downs moved on to Southampton, US men's national team player. Max Fingrafa, whose name I'm still learning properly. Left back signed by RB Leipzig.
Good player.
They sold Stefan Tigges to Paderborn. Former Dortmund player, I think, if I'm not mistaken.
I've interviewed Tigges once. Cool kid.
Was he a
Good
Dortmund
player, but
player?
like just injuries and kind of slowed him down.
He was Dortmund. My memory hasn't
He'll
lost me
probably
yet.
score 25 goals for Paderborn and lead them to the Bundesliga next year. He has like a typical second Bundesliga belt.
Yeah, fair it is. I know for a fact we do have some Cologne fans in the chat right now, so especially Stevie Smith, who kicked off the chat with a classic essay chant, so he can obviously let us know what he thinks about squads. But yeah, they've done a lot of business as well, man. They picked up Isaac Johansson from Düsseldorf, Ragnar Aka from Kaiserslautern, Sebastian Sebulensen from Brøndby, Marius Butler from Hoffenheim, Tom Kraus from Mainz, Robert Zieler from Hanover, there's a name from the past, and a few players picked up on loan, including another American, Christopher Lund,
Good player.
from Palermo, and Kaminski, interesting, from Wolfsburg, who desperately needs to start to get some minutes in the Bundesliga.
Just got done too, which is a good name.
Yeah,
Valencia.
it's been a lot in and a lot out, hasn't it? Really, you can obviously see where they've picked up a left back replacement. They've picked up a few centre forwards, Ragnar Aka from Kaiserslautern. How well placed do you feel like Köln are going into this new season?
Yeah, I actually kind of like their business. Ragnar Ache was a standout player for Kaiserslautern in the second division last year, right? Really played really well. Had some big money offers from Major League Soccer and wanted to stay in Germany and play in Bundesliga instead, which I think is probably a better move on his part. I feel there is another level that he can reach too. Said El Mala is one of these standout German talents, a player to watch, left winger, enormous amount of talent, in high demand in the Premier League. I think they can hang on to him. Isak Johansson is a really interesting name. Tom Kraus comes with Bundesliga experience. I like that. I like the bet that they're making on Lund. He comes from Palermo, right? American national team player. I actually think their business has been really good. They responded well to Damien Downs leaving. They brought in Ragnar Ache as a replacement. He's not gonna need not much time to get integrated because he's played in Germany for so long now. Obviously he's German, but spent some time in the Netherlands where he had his breakthrough. Um, they did this sort of business that would worry me if I was Heidenheim or one of those other smaller clubs, right? I'm gonna say similar things about HSV. It's actually a lot better business than they have done in the past when they went up to the Bundesliga. So I would probably at this stage give them a C. Maybe that's harsh, but I also think that they're not done yet. But I think they're done just enough to be good enough to stay in the league next year.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think Ragnar Aka is a really interesting one to pick up. He's been scoring goals in this Zweite Bundesliga for a while now. He got 18 goals last season, 16 goals this season before. I was like Reuter Furt before that as well. He did a decent job. Even like guys like Jan Thielman, who we've kind of been hoping they'll kind of kick on, still doing well. I saw he scored a brace, I think, in one of their preseason friendlies. I feel like they've kind of got enough kind of depth in that squad to do them quite well. And I would be kind of going up to like a B for them, if not for the fact that they've still kind of lost a couple of key players there. Not to mention the goalkeeper in January, whose name completely eludes me, who went off to Bayern Munich.
Bayern.
Yeah, exactly. So they have kind of lost a decent amount of players there, but we'll have to kind of see. You think Ragnar Aka would be a good replacement for Fingerafa, and then maybe Damien Downs can't be replaced immediately. Sorry, other way around. Apologies. But yeah, I don't know. I'm tempted to go with a B here.
C. I mean C plus. I'd be happy with that too. C plus B. Yeah. If you can kind of
we'll stick it in B and see how they rank with the rest of them.
Lukas Kwasniok is a really interesting coach. Really good pickup.
Yeah.
High demand. He was linked to Leverkusen, was linked to Stuttgart. Did really good work with Paderborn, and Paderborn is kind of like a coaching. Has had some really good coaches go through their ranks, and so I'm. We've been down on Köln in the past on this podcast for being Köln. And I actually like what they're doing at the moment. It makes sense.
Yeah, well, it's easy to be down in Cologne because their fans think they're going to win the World Cup every season, and they never shut up about it. So your natural reaction as a neutral is to just kind of push against that. So that's often where that comes from.
Yeah,
but,
I was a Bavarian, so that doesn't help. There's a natural distrust to anything Köln.
Yes, it's you live in or around the city long enough and you realise that everyone in Cologne thinks it's the best city in the world, which reminds me of the city icon from Glasgow, where everyone in Glasgow thinks Glasgow's the best city in the world. Anyway, the next club, FC Union Berlin. So in terms of their departures, quite a few big names off the old wage bill here, man. Kevin Volland obviously left to 1860 Munich.
Yeah, hero scored this weekend.
Yeah. Kevin Vogt moved on to Bochum. Leonard Grill left for Dynamo Dresden. Paul Jaco left for Munster.
Mhm,
Ivan Prachin left for Kaiserslautern. Robin Gosens left for Fiorentina, back to Serie A.
mhm.
But probably the biggest one's Benedict Hollerbach, who
You know,
pretty big, transfer fee of 10 million euros to FC Mainz to Mainz.
mhm,
Um, Big name for them last season. 14 goals and assists. No, sorry,
mhm,
12 goals and assists. And a player who I think will do really well at Mainz. I'm sure we'll
mhm,
come on to talk about them in a minute, but a really kind of I'm sure Berlin fans obviously appreciate him, but I think a player who maybe his stats were okay by all means, but I think a player who does even more off the ball, if you know what I mean, a really hard working player. So I think he'll be missed. But alas, they have brought in other players. Oliver Burkhoff's joined from Werder Bremen, which is a
mhm,
big deal at the time because he was their kind of hero in the kind of second half of the season for Werder Bremen. So he moved on. They picked up Stanley Soke from Hoffenheim, Matteo Raab from Hamburg, Wu Yong Zhong from
mhm.
Stuttgart, Ansa from Paderborn, and Andre Illich from Lille. And so they spent about 13.5 million euros. They've made about 18.5 million euros in transfer fees. Um, Maybe not the obviously Illich, of course. So I should say joined on a permanent deal, obviously, after being there last season. Um, Maybe not the kind of scattergun um, approach to the window that we've used to seeing from
Mhm,
Union Berlin in previous seasons, Manu. Um, but selective. They've picked up a lot of players. Many of them obviously have Bundesliga experience, and
yeah.
they're obviously going to have to do pretty well because Stefan Baumgart's the manager there, head coach rather. And it'll be interesting to see what they can actually do, won't it? Because they had a very kind of up and down, well, rather down than up season, I should say, last year. I think Baumgart probably surprised both of us
Mhm,
with doing quite well,
yeah.
took them away from the threat of relegation. And that window, or this kind of window, suggests to me that he's relatively comfortable with the squad that Union Berlin have, and it's just about working with them pre-season, adding two or three players here or there, but nothing really, not the kind of wholesale changes that we're actually have been used to seeing from Union Berlin in recent years.
Well, I mean, he knows got a Scottish guy on the squad, right? Baumgart needed that.
Of course, of
Big
course.
Scotch drinker, Baumgart, got, got Oliver Burke. I like that transfer. I actually think Burke, was it Burke? Do you pronounce the E in this case or not?
No, it's just
No,
Burke.
Burke. Okay, cool. Um,
He's from Nottingham. No one in Nottingham's called him Burkey.
yeah, this is one of those things in Canada. Like we have these nickname thingies. There's a famous
Yeah.
general manager in hockey, and his last name is Burke, but everyone calls him Burkey.
Ah, okay. I
Yeah,
mean, I'm sure his nickname's
so
Burkey, so I'm sure he probably won't mind that. But yeah.
sometimes throw the E in there. But yeah, I like him as a player. I know he's despite being 28, he has all these skills and he sometimes puts them together and sometimes he doesn't. Is extremely fast. But I actually think he's going to do quite well in a Baumgart system. I think it's a perfect player for the way he plays. So that pickup actually makes a lot of sense to me. I also like Wo Yong as a pickup as well from Stuttgart. He wasn't going to play there. That squad is deep, and I think Stuttgart have other ambitions going forward. And so, yeah, I mean, I think for them, the goal really is to play a season where they don't have to worry. Nice midfield
Hmm.
kind of finish. They had now years where they were playing Champions League football, and they had years where they're fighting relegation. I think they want to have just a nice, boring kind of season, and I think they've done just enough. I suspect that there's probably more coming.
Hmm.
As there's often the case with these clubs, they kind of go to the bargain bin as the transfer window kind of comes towards a close and pick up players here and there. They were always busy the last few years towards the tail end of the transfer window, and I suspect Union Berlin will do that here too. But I think the pieces are more or less all there. Probably maybe Oliver Burke is the Hollerbach replacement. Not sure if that's good enough, but yeah, other than that, I think good work so far, Stefan. What are we giving you?
Yeah. I'm just
C.
laughing. The guys at 50 plus dollar just replied to my Blue Sky post saying, "Great analysis of the rosters so far, minus the Köln fan slander, which I would be offended by if I were biased." Um,
Which they are.
yeah, harsh but true. I'm in terms of Union Berlin, I think I'm going to go middle of the road here and say a C. They've
Yeah.
picked up some solid players, nothing really groundbreaking, and losing Hollerbach I think is a huge deal for them. So it's
C.
the way I'm looking at this is like I find it very hard to predict how they're going to kick off this season because the window's been, I don't want to say underwhelming because sometimes a quiet window is absolutely what you need, especially for a club like Union Berlin who's been so up and down recently. Um, but yeah, I'm going to go for a C here if that works for you.
Yeah, C is perfect.
Cool. Right. On to
Frankfurt.
one of the big guns. Eintracht Frankfurt.
I like this is mixed through that like the clubs just randomly kind of pop up because of the way this is listed.
Yeah, and we're making the Dortmund fans wait a long time. I should say this was not our. I didn't come up with a
No.
schedule. The when I think it's in the. I think it's actually in the order with which I uploaded the logos, which I'm thinking. Actually, no, it can't be. It can't be. I was gonna say it might be alphabetical, but it can't be because I'm pretty sure I know for a fact that Augsburg are first when it comes to alphabetical.
No, because it's probably
Um,
FCR.
yeah,
The
I don't
logo
know.
name is probably FCR.
Anyway, we move on to Frankfurt. The Eagles. Let's talk about they've in terms of the players they've sold. Obviously, Hugo Ekitike, big player, 80 million euros to Liverpool. Tuta, player who've kind of flown under the radar, centre
Mhm.
back, has left for Qatar. Batanovic moved on to Freiburg. Nacho Ferries moved on to Westerlo in Belgium. Players they've picked up: Ritsu Doan from Freiburg for 21 million euros. Jonathan Burkhardt from Mainz for 21 million euros. Both players the joint fourth most expensive signings Frankfurt have ever made. Rasmus Christensen from Leeds, that's just a deal being made permanent. And Love Arhov, who
Love the
comes
name.
from the Swedish. Can you name the Swedish club, man? Have you got it in front of you?
Broma Boykana. Broma Boykana.
Broma Boykarna. Yeah, incredible. 17-year-old talent who comes from obviously from
But
Swedish football.
I think won't join until January 1st.
Yes, because of course in Sweden they go January to December, don't they? So, but still a very young player. He won't be playing. I'd be very surprised if he was first team player. But yeah, big news obviously is that I mean it's not just this, but Ikitiki's left. Doan, Burkhardt have come in. That's more or less the gist of it, isn't it, Manu?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Burkhardt is in some ways the Ekitike replacement. Um, Ritsu is probably going to help finally close the hole that Marmouche left. Um, I know for a fact that they're still looking to bring in an attacking midfielder and maybe a central midfielder in case Hugo Larsen leaves. That's always a potential. I mean, they are playing in the Champions League this year. Tuta leaving. It's kind of flew under the radar. Who was the defender last year that left out of nowhere to PSG, and we never really noticed it?
Pacho?
Pacho,
Was it
thank you,
Pat?
William
Yeah.
Pacho. And
Yeah. For
so
40 million euros, nobody
40
was
million euros.
supposed.
Yeah,
It's
you know,
classic
that's just
Frankfurt.
Frankfurt. Such just Frankfurt for you. They just sell like a star for like 40 to 100 million euros and you don't even feel it on their squad. It's remarkable. Artur Theate is of course in there. Again, I suspect they're not done yet. They will probably make some more signings to react to departures. Central midfielder, I've been told, is on the list. Attacking midfielder, I've been told, is on the list. And if there is someone that comes across them, like maybe another striker. But you know, I like this squad already. I'm not concerned at all about Ikitike's departure. I think that was long planned. Burkhardt is a great replacement. Doesn't even have to move cities as he lived in Mainz, right? Which is a 20-minute S-Bahn ride from the stadium. So that's a fantastic pickup. Ritsu Doan, great pickup. Dortmund and them battled over him. I know they're still interested in McAtee, but they're trying to make the finances work, right? We reported that.
Yeah.
And so if that would be, of course, another really great addition. But yeah, Frankfurt are doing Frankfurt things. I like their squad. And remember too, they're having players come in. We're getting a year older. Can Uzun is one. We're expecting him to step out. Paxton Aronson, the American. They have high hopes for him to stick with the squad this year. So, there's always one or two guys that maybe like needed a year to get used to Frankfurt, and then they're now going to make the next step, as it's always the case for them. So yeah, I like this squad, Stefan. I probably be giving them a B at the moment, maybe even like towards an A, considering the income and like the replacements that they've brought in.
Yeah, I should say, I forgot to mention this when we were still talking about Union Berlin there, but Kilzig, one of someone who's also watching the stream, says, I hope Keimlin comes back healthy. I thought he showed a lot of promise at Pauli and was hoping that he'd come back to keep him. So obviously, talking about Union Berlin central defender who was out with a foot surgery, I think, towards the second half of the season.
Yeah.
But yeah, big player for them, so absolutely. Frankfurt, I guess it all kind of hinges, Manu, on whether Burkhardt and Ritsu Doan can hit the ground running. More so Burkhardt, I would say. Obviously, I don't think he was really intended to be the Hugo Ikitike replacement. I think they obviously needed another kind of centre forward in there anyway, considering the fact that they lost Omar Marmoush, which feels like 3 or 4 years ago at this point, but wasn't. And they brought in Ilya Vahe from Ligue 1, and he hasn't really hit the ground running just yet. So yeah, as you said, they probably will do more business. I wouldn't be surprised if they do bring in maybe another centre forward. Because as things stand, it's Burkhardt, Vahe, and Baswai, the 31-year-old who they picked up from Galatasaray, I want to say, maybe.
Fenerbahce, right?
Fenerbahce, sorry, my apologies.
Yeah.
And yeah, I do feel like it kind of all hinges on Burkhardt there. So I think there's maybe some concern there. They obviously do have goals elsewhere, as you mentioned, Kanu Zun, Ritsu Doan's obviously a very goal-orientated wide player, so that's fine. Even Angsar Gnauf, plays a wing back, I suppose, as well, but he's kind of coming on leaps and bounds with every passing season. So yeah, I mean, they do have a lot of talent in there. I think I would probably just want to see them maybe bring in another maybe another centre forward, and as you said, maybe an attacking midfielder, which could be James McAtee if he does come in. So, yeah, I'm happy with a B, if you're happy with a B.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, B works.
Cool. Perfect. Right. Best team in Bavaria, here we go. FC Augsburg, who, surprisingly, Manu, moved on their head coach in the summer window. Brought in Sandro Wagner, who was linked to, I think, half the Bundesliga before he ended up moving on to Often for Augsburg.
He was linked to my pub team.
He was linked. I like that he was linked to just about every Bundesliga club, and then he opted for the one that's like 30 miles up the road from where he probably lives. Maybe he was holding out for that. But I'll quickly run through their transfers so far. So in terms of the players they've signed, they picked up Christian Matsima, who's a young central defender from Monaco. Cedric Ziziger from Wolfsburg. They picked up for 4 million euros another central defender. Masengo from Burnley for 5 million euros. Eli Sad from St. Pauli for 2 million euros. Fellhauer from Elsberg, and Oliver Sorg, young left back from Sturm Graz second team, and Killian Dong from Troyes, the Ligue 1 side. In terms of the players they've sold, Udo Kahaya from sent to Besiktas for 5 million euros. Bello is off to Dinamo Zagreb for 4 million euros. Cardona is off to Saint Etienne for 2.5 million. FIFA is off to Darmstadt for 700k. And there's a few other loan players. I'm trying to see the free transfers if there's anyone notable there. Fredrik Jensen left for free. Robert Gubby left for free right back. Marcel Lubick left for and that's a loan deal, so that's fine. Yeah, I think Augsburg probably another one, Manu, that's very hard to read at this moment in time, because I was honestly quite surprised that they opted to make a managerial change. I thought Jess Torup did a perfectly solid job at Augsburg, but There are obviously forces at play there that want the club to maybe go a different direction, maybe want to be a bit more forceful, want to be pushing further up the league table perhaps. And simply just kind of establishing them as a mid-table club doesn't seem to be enough at Augsburg anymore.
No, that's exactly it. The biggest star is the coach. The coach is Sandro Wagner, was a highly in-demand name. It is amazing that a coach who hasn't really coached that much is considered to be such a star name. And in fairness, I guess Sandro Wagner did really good work when he was in Unterhaching, but that was the fourth division. This is the Bundesliga now. He did great work working with Julian Nagelsmann, and built himself an enormous reputation within German football that he now actually has to start meeting. And I think that is a really big ask. I think the availability of a really big name, and the fact that they were kind of upset with the image that they had as a gray mouse, the unwanted Bundesliga club, right? A lot of people within German football kind of feel that maybe at one of the big traditional clubs that they're taking up a spot for one of the big traditional clubs, and to increase and better the image, they brought in new sporting director team. They brought in Sandro Wagner. They brought in a bunch of players that were young with upside, right? The hope is to develop these players. Someone like Kylian Dong, someone like Masongo. It's a bunch of very good young players in there. Noah Kai Banks, who comes from their own academies, American, German, Hawaii is his background, which is kind of cool. But Yusuf Kabadai is another player. Elias Saad, interesting name coming in from St. Pauli. It all feels and has this. It feels a little bit like an experiment, doesn't it? We don't know which direction this could potentially go. This could go really well. This could work out fantastically with Sandro Wagner playing the most progressive football in German football that we've ever seen, but this could also backfire terribly. And I have a really hard time putting my finger on it at the moment.
Yeah, I must admit, I'm not really blown away by it so far. I'm quite surprised that they've kind of prioritized central defenders, to be honest with you, for much of this, because I would have said that defense was probably one of the few things that worked quite well for them last season. The problem for Augsburg was just that they couldn't score goals. And obviously the club took a decision and said, yeah, well, that was just Torp's fault, his style of football. You could argue about how pragmatic it was, or whether, safety first, and whether Augsburg should have been playing better. But the fact of the matter is they were absolutely dreadful at scoring goals. They had the fourth worst attacking rate. In fact, joint third worst with Union Berlin. And is that going to change because they've picked up Elias Saad or Kylian Dong from Troyes, who got 1 goal in 17 games in Ligue 2 last season? I'm not so sure. So I think we could probably call this, Manu. I think we might have our first F on the table.
That's fair.
What are you thinking? Yeah, happy with that?
Let's go.
All right. Sorry, Augsburg. Right, the big one.
Here comes the controversy.
Here comes the controversy.
FC Hollywood.
FC Hollywood. So let me just quickly pull up the transfers. Right, so players who have left the club. And we might have to add the name to this. Isn't technically down on it yet, but Matthias Tell's obviously left for 35 million euros. Adam Asnou's left for Everton. Halpelina's left to Tottenham on loan, which will presumably become a deal. As we mentioned, Kradzik's moved on to. Sorry, we hadn't mentioned he was playing at Heidenheim. He's now moved on to Salzburg on loan. Vidovic off to Dinamo Zagreb. Zaragoza finally got his move. Celta Vigo. Perez is off to Hamburg on loan as well. All those on loans. Eric Dyer leaves for free. Leroy Sané leaves for free. Thomas Muller leaves for free. And of course, as we now know, Kingsley Coman is expected to move on in the coming days as well. Lots of reporting that he's off to Saudi Arabia. Yeah. In terms of who Bayern have signed, they signed Luis Diaz from Liverpool for 70 million euros, Jonathan Tah for 2 million euros, Tom Bischoff from Hoffenheim for 300k. I should say that Ta and Bischoff deals, man, are more or less free transfers, but that was compensation paid to get them in for the Club World Cup. Before we actually jump into this, I'm going to quickly jump in here because Flipsicle in the chat has said there's no way Heidenheim survived the season, so he's just putting his 2 pence in, or 2 cents, shall we say?
Yeah, you might be right.
Yeah, they've been kind of so many miracles. He also adds, I think Frankfurt ranked a bit low as well, having them on the same tier as Köln's a bit wild. They've made some good signings as well too with Burkhardt and Doan.
That's fair.
Yeah, maybe we're a bit optimistic about Köln. It's more about us being up.
Coming from, right? Like, I mean, Frankfurt already have a good side. Köln, second division. Like, it's...
Yeah. Like I said, people are jumping into the chat midway through. We should say we're not ranking the league. We're not ranking the squads. We're not saying Köln have a better squad than us, or Union Berlin are equal level as Frankfurt. We're talking about who's done the most business, or who's done the best business in terms of improving or getting their squad worse. But anyway, yes. The one that most of the people listening to the show will want to know about is, of course, Bayern Munich. Do you want to kick this one off, Manu?
So, King off to Saudi, we think, right? 30 million euros. So this is a Sadio Mane goodbye package. Is I think what we're calling this. I'm not actually, I know this will help Bayern Munich with the salary. Not sure what you get to do with the extra 30 million euros. But that's another big hole in that squad that they need to fill. And King was such an important player, not just in the attack, but also in defense. I've written about this a lot. I actually would go as far as saying they would have been better off keeping Kingsley Coman over signing Luis Diaz. That might trigger a few people, but I think he's a more complete player in some ways. But here we are. He's off for his market value to Saudi Arabia. It looks like, while people like Serge Gnabry are still staying. I am so curious to see what they're going to do here, because they now need another left winger desperately. And I'm really worried that they're just going to pick up some kid from France that will just block the development of young players like Leonard Karl and Paul Werner, which I think is going to be a huge problem for them if they're going down that path. If they can somehow get Nick Woltemade, we're talking about a completely different scenario here. But right now, the attack is very thin, Stefan. Like Luis Diaz, Serge Gnabry, Michael Olise, Harry Kane, and a young, very promising-looking Jonah Kuziazare. That's it. That is who you're trying to win the Champions League with. These players, like, if they're all fit, you could probably do it, but we all know that's not going to happen. You look at what PSG have an attack, like the English clubs have an attack, Barcelona, Real Madrid, like they have twice the squad there just for attacking players. And that's really worrying if you're giving up on Kingsley Coman at this stage.
It is, and it's not just the attack that's thin in terms of not even just reserves, but also the squad itself. You look at the fact that they've got 4 central defenders in that team: Jonathan Tah, Kim, Meccano, and Hiroki Ito. At least 2 of them are pretty injury prone. Kim's had issues all last season. A lot of chat about him moving on.
Yeah,
and you very quickly can get yourself. Ito's actually currently injured as things stand. Very quickly get yourselves into a situation where Bayern are relying on Jonathan Tah to be an outstanding signing and hit the ground running very quickly there. We'll need to see if they can do exactly that. Equally, right backs still haven't sorted that position out. It's still this kind of afterthought. There's just this kind of hope that Konrad Laimer's season, so right back still a huge issue there. And like the thing is with that right back position as well, I feel is that okay, they've got 3 players who can technically play that position, but if you're Bayern Munich and you're in the quarterfinals of the Champions League, I don't rate any of those 3 players to be a right back for Bayern Munich. Equally, the centre back position, very easily find yourself in a situation where it's like Ito and Jonathan Tah up against some of the best players in the world, which I think it's a big question mark. And then you go to the midfield position, you're absolutely right. obviously they've got Pavlovic, Kimmich, Bischoff, and Goretzka. It looks very, very likely that Bischoff's going to have to play a very significant role in this team, which, okay, fair enough. He's one of the best young players in German football last season, so that's why they bought him. But, I didn't think I thought Goretzka had good games last season, but there was still a lot of talk about him potentially moving on as well, because he's just one of these kind of lumbering older players that the best years are behind him. Pavlovic obviously was out with a huge injury. Kimmich, okay, fine, Kimmich is Kimmich, I suppose, but you're still talking there maybe about 4 players for at least 2 positions, and I'd say Goretzka is probably not good enough to rely on long term. Question marks as to whether Bischoff can make the step up. I hope he does. Yeah. But again, relying on a new signing to really hit the ground running. You then move into attack, same situation with Luis Diaz. But as well as that, you're also, looking, as you said, looking around that squad. Musiala obviously picked up a huge injury. He'll be out for the first half of the season. Who's going to step in there? They're hoping that Paul Vanner can be that guy. Okay, fair enough. If they want to go down this direction of relying on the youth players, I'm sure the fans will appreciate that. Yeah. But in terms of the summer signings, there's not a huge amount of inspiration there. We've talked at length about Luis Diaz and, whether he's a guy who can step in there. I think he can be a perfectly solid like-for-like replacement for Leroy Sané, but we're talking about a squad who's missing Sané and Thomas Müller. And we'll be missing Jamal Musiala for the first half of the season. And all Bayern have done so far is bring in Luis Diaz and hope that maybe Paul Vanner can step up with a couple of goals here and there. And that's without even talking about the prospect of Kingsley Coman leaving.
Yeah.
Sorry?
Leonard Carl looks like the real deal.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, by all means, if 6 months down the line, Vanner, Leonard Carl, these guys, Pavlovic, we obviously know will do very well, who are big steps up to be the number one. Bischoff obviously goes on to be a great player, then absolutely, by all means. I've seen some people in the chat saying, Stanisic is a solid defender, just hasn't had game time. He is solid, but he's not Bayern Munich right back quality, in my opinion. He wasn't even Leverkusen right back quality, and he was a good squad player at Leverkusen, but by no means was he their first choice right back or their first choice centre back. So I'd love for Stanisic to prove me wrong here, but I'm just not entirely sure. I buy this idea that he's the guy who's going to solve the right back positions. Someone in the comments also said, I think Limer's underrated. He's by no means a natural right back, but he's doing an all right job. He does do an all right job. You're absolutely right. He's very solid. He's very quick. He works hard. I totally get that. But, we're talking about a club here who should have aspirations of challenging for the Champions League.
All right, is not good enough.
And I just think if you kind of add all the positives and negatives up here, Manu, I think we're definitely kind of looking at a squad that are missing 2 or 3 big names. By all means, they might go and get them. They're obviously linked with Xavi Simons. They're still linked with Nick Waldemade. They've been linked with Nicholas Jackson at Chelsea.
Isn't coming.
Yeah, well, no, I don't. I mean, I don't know if any of these guys will be coming, but they still need probably another 2 of these guys. So, as things stand, I would say Bayern haven't done particularly well in this transfer window.
No, I think it's at best a D. I wonder, so if you go, let's say we go for a D here, how would we feel the grade would be if they do land Waldemade?
Sorry. I think they need more than that. I think they need a right back. I think they probably need a centre back.
Killed 60. That's a good statement. The backline concerns more than the attack.
I think they probably need their central midfielder. I think, on their day, Bayern can set up with Diaz on the left. They can start up with Michael Olsen on the right, Harry Kane up front. So they can stick. They could obviously go for a midfield 3 of Kimmich, Bischoff, and Pavlovic, and you're like, yeah, everything's fine. But it's when you kind of get into match day 20 or something like that, or you're into the 7th match group game of the Champions League. That's when these things start to kind of fall apart. But yeah, I think there's a real lack of depth there, to be perfectly honest with you.
I just also don't think I don't think they're gonna walk the league with this squad.
Yeah, well, Kilzig just said, the back line's a problem, but then he says, but I still think they'll walk the league.
See, I don't think. I mean, obviously they're still favorites to win, but I don't think they're gonna walk it.
Yeah, Flipsicle says at least the quality Bayern have now is good in attack, even if the depth's not there. Front four of Kane, Diaz, Musiala, and Diaz. Sorry, he meant Andolise is scary by any team. And yeah, you're absolutely right. Like
Yeah,
that starting 11, or at least that attacking lineup, man for man, looks very solid. But as you said, Manu, the teams are coming up against the Champions League this year. They all have 2 or 3 of those attacking lineups. And
Jake has a really good point because remember, this Bayern team was already 5 games into the season, so
yeah,
like
so
that's
Jake
not a
says,
lot of depth.
just for people who are listening to the show who don't know what Jake said, do you think that the Club World Cup is going to affect the usual starting squad going in like November? It's a very fair point. It's a fair point in terms of that squad in terms of longevity. The other thing that I think is kind of a blaring issue right now, man, as well, is what happens if Harry Kane picks up an injury?
No, they're screwed.
They don't have a Thomas Muller in there who can kind of step up. As you mentioned, they've obviously got young 18-year-old Jon Akusa Asari.
Who's really good. He could be the next Isaac. Really good player. But
absolutely.
Is he there already? Right? That's the question. Like, it's a question mark.
Yeah, there's 3 or 4 young players who've been kind of called into the first team squad this summer because they have to fill in the cracks in that team.
And that could work. Van Gaal
the question is, right? It could work, but the question is, have they been called up because they're good enough, or they've been called up because Bayern haven't signed enough players? So it'd be interesting if the folk can we can maybe say what we think in a minute, but I'm interested to see what grade people would give for Bayern before we kind of call this. But so yeah, let us know what you guys think in the chat in terms of the S, A, B, C, D, or F. But yeah, Manu, Flipsicle says Company is going to play Gnabry as a striker if Kane gets injured, which is going to be a sight to see. Well, Gnabry signed a new contract under the assumption that he'd be get to play as a new striker, so he might finally get that role. But yeah, Manu, what's your kind of concluding thoughts here before we maybe do draw come up with our?
I hope they're busy I hope the next 3 weeks Max Eberl is on the phone a lot.
That's it. Okay. Yeah, I know. I mean, I completely agree with you. I said on social media today that I think Saudi Arabia have maybe answered Bayern's prayers by taking Kingsley Coman off their hands and giving them some money for the issue. But someone says nothing to see here. Says I reckon Vincent Kompany will sub himself on at some point. It's not beyond the realms of possibility at this rate. In terms of a score, Manu, I'm going to say, I think I'm going to have to put them at D.
Yeah, D it is.
Yeah, because I don't want to say an F because they've obviously picked up some decent players. Bischoff's a good player, Diaz is a good player. But as things currently stand, I'm not happy with it. But yeah, people in the chat can let us know what they think. I'm seeing Flipsicle say I'd give Bayern a B. Maybe I'm just overjoyed by how happy the Sani sale made me. I think some Bayern fans might come to eat their words with Leroy Sané, to be honest with you. I think they might find they come in like November, December, they might be crawling or desperate for a player like that to come off the bench. But yeah, right. Sané was Sané second in the squad, I think, for goals and assists last year. Maybe third, actually, behind Olise and Kane. So, but yeah, anyway, we are 50 minutes in, we're not even halfway through this, so we're going to have to really kind of speed through some of these. Let's move on to St. Pauli. If anyone obviously wants to make some concluding thoughts on Bayern, you can let us know and I'll try and grab those as we go. St. Pauli. So a team who obviously did very well towards the end of the season. Obviously sold Philippe Trieu to Freiburg, a very good right back. Gulavogi left for Lens in Ligue 1. As we mentioned, Elias Sad left to Augsburg. Jonas Eggestein left for Austria Vienna, and Carlo Burkhalter left for St. Gallen in Switzerland. And the players that they picked up, Fujita from St. Trudan from in Belgium team, and Louis Ope, they signed from Bielefeld, really interesting signing there. Wobach signed from signed from Klagenfurt. I've just realised I've completely made a miss. No, I've not. Okay, so I was just double checking the Golivogi thing because he seemed to have gone back and forth there. He signed for 3 million and he sold back to Lons for 4.5 million. But yeah, St. Pauli, Manu, a club who proved, I guess, in the end that they had enough about them to kind of stay in the Bundesliga. But they've made some interesting deals this summer.
Yeah, and I like the business. They added more depth. They made 2 signings that are their club record signings. That's both Golivogi and Fujita. Slowly but surely, thinking bigger and bigger as they're trying to establish themselves in the Bundesliga. I think they addressed the things that they needed to address, right? Add more depth, maybe a little bit more scoring. See how players like Abdoulaye Cissé kick on now that they had half a year to get used to the Bundesliga. Yeah, I think from where they were and what they're doing, it's been a good window for them. Whether that's enough to survive another year in the Bundesliga remains to be seen.
Yeah, Flipsko said not losing too many key players this summer is huge for St. Pauli. I completely agree. I thought Philippe Trieu is a really good player who's obviously moved on to Freiburg, but I wrote a piece not that long ago on which players that were some of the Bundesliga transfers that people might not have noticed, and Louis Opie was definitely one of them from Bielefeld, who obviously was one of the stars of that kind of German Cup campaign last season. So we do have to kind of pick up the pace a little bit, obviously, just because we have kind of. Yeah, let's go for. I'm happy to go for B as well. Kilzig said Jay Jones injured his shoulder early in the preseason and will probably miss the next couple of weeks, but Hontoyadai has looked good. Rolls Royce says curious to see where Leipzig ranks and all this. Yeah, we'll get to Leipzig, don't worry. As if by fate, the next club on it are HSV, the other Hamburg side. We'll probably have to be very diplomatic, Manu, here with how we how we compare them to St. Pauli. But you've been actually really impressed with Hamburg this season, haven't you? Or this summer.
Yeah, I've been really impressed. Every signing that they've made has Stefan Kunz written all over it. Ryan Philipp from Braunschweig, a winger with lots of potential, only 24. They added a lot of depth to midfield, whether it's Remberg, Capaldo. We talked about those transfers. Yusuf Poulsen will give them the experience that they need in the attack to survive in the league. I think that's key. He will also be a massive add in the dressing room, something that you cannot underestimate. Georgi Gokolishvili from Shakhtar Donetsk, great player, right back. Jordan Toruna Riga comes back to German football at 27, now a very inexperienced centre back. Same with Mohamed Omari, 25-year-old centre back from Stadren. I think they're addressing all the right things. They're adding quality and depth to a side that was already really good in the Zweite Bundesliga last year. I think for me, this might be my first A.
Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I think they're addressing all the things that need to be addressed. They're adding the quality you need to survive in the league, and they're doing it all at a budget. It's good.
Yeah, I mean, I think the only thing I would say is that they have lost 2 big players, at least in Ludovic Reitz, the central midfielder, and of course David Selke was a top goal scorer last season.
But he's not a Bundesliga player, right? Like, he's the kind of guy that gets you 20 goals in the second division, and then the moment he steps up to the Bundesliga, he just doesn't get them in the Bundesliga. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point. It's a very fair point. And yeah, right, they have picked up some interesting players there. We talked about Yusuf Poulsen joining the club. By no means, I mean, this is probably he's kind of the antithesis of actually David Selke in the sense he doesn't score a lot of goals, but is obviously a proven Bundesliga player, very useful off the ball as well. I maybe wouldn't go as high as A for Hamburg, but I must admit I've not looked into them as much as you, so I'm happy to jump in here and kind of give them an A. But it'll be a big shout. St. Pauli fans will obviously be livid with us here, but it's interesting. We've obviously got them and Köln doing very well so far, which is good to see because we do. Obviously, we've been wanting to see I think you and I have been clamoring for the kind of bigger clubs in the Zweite Bundesliga to come back. Um, Flipskill said Manu is so spot on about David Selke, it's crazy. Yeah, he's definitely a Zweite Bundesliga man.
Yeah.
But yeah, we've been kind of banging on, hoping the kind of top team, the bigger clubs come back, and this is example why, because they have the resources to actually improve their squad when they win promotion, as opposed to, a lot of the kind of, shall we say, minnows who kind of, like your Holstein Kiel is a perfect example of that, who obviously just don't have the resources to take advantage of the promotion. But yeah, okay. Moving on to Hoffenheim. So in terms of the players they've sold on, Anton Stack left for Leeds for 20 million euros, which is an interesting one. Joshua Korshe moved on to Southampton for 3.5 million euros. Marius Butler moved on to Köln, which we talked about. Free transfers. Obviously, Tom Bischoff left. Kaderabek, the right back, 33-year-old, moved to Sparta Prague. Christoph Lenz moved to Dusseldorf. And a bunch of loan moves, man. I think that's maybe the gist of it.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the players they picked up, Advadula from FC Basel, Koke Mashida from Union Saint-Gilloise, signed for 4.547 million. Berger signed from Stoke City for 4 million euros. They picked up Tim Lemperle from Cologne. Kufal, really interesting one they picked up from West Ham, really random one. And they also signed centre back Bernardo from Bochum. I might jump in here quickly and just say one of the players. This is another player that I had on my kind of players to watch was Abdullah from that they picked up from Basel. His stats last season for Basel were outstanding. And I'm really excited to kind of see how he does. Maybe partly the reason why they were quite happy to maybe move on from Anton Stack. I'm sure another reason is that Leeds were quite happy to pay a decent fee for him. But I think he'll do very well. Machida looks like a decent player they picked up from Union Saint-Gilloise as well. Hoffenheim, man, who have always, even in the kind of current rot they've been in the last kind of couple of years, have still put a lot of money into young players. And they've just kind of been desperately waiting for a head coach to kind of do well for them. They've stuck with Christian Ilzer, despite what I thought was a pretty lukewarm start last season when he joined the club. But, I got to give it to them. I think for the most part, they're doing a pretty decent job here in the window. And I'm really, really excited to see how Abdullah does, because I think, he's 21 years old. I think in a couple of years, he'll be linked to, he's got Dortmund or Leverkusen or even Bayern written all over him, to be honest with you.
Yeah. I mean, Hoffenheim. Where do we start here? They've been in the news for all the wrong reasons, right? I'm just like double research. While you were talking, I'm like did research here a little bit, on how many Roger Wittmann Rogon players Hoffenheim have left in their squad, because there has been a big falling out between Roger Wittmann, who had its own separate budget at Hoffenheim's transfer. Its own transfer budget there. So, and there are still a few Rogon players, Fisnik Aslani and Umo Tuomusu, and new signing Tim Lemperle, who got in trouble at Köln last year for getting drunk on a boat and punching someone out. And then said,
What else are you supposed to do on a boat, though? That's boat rules.
Yeah. Also, he said like there's nothing. He also said to the media, "There's nothing wrong with day drinking." So. He's now in Hoffenheim. It's been so chaotic there, Stefan, and like the amount of money that's been spent there, right, has been criticized by their own players. And Aslani comes back and he's a really good player. Did really well at Alversberg last year. And you mentioned some of the other signings as well, but I'm worried that everything that's going on outside of Hoffenheim, the transfer dealings, and then now the falling out of the agency could be a huge problem. And I'm also wondering if, more players in and out, when are they finally going to have a squad cohesion here, right? So it's a lot of names, it's a lot of traffic in and out, and I don't see much of a plan. I'm not a big fan.
So what are you saying? C, D?
D.
I'm going to go for a C just because literally one name, Advadula. So would you be okay with that?
Yeah, let's do that.
Because I think he's such an outstanding name. But you're right, it could prove to be quite terrible. But we'll go with that. Mainz.
Might.
interesting one. Maybe not a huge amount to report here because there's not been a huge amount done. In terms of players they've sold, Fernandez has moved on to Young Boys. They have sold Ayorke, the centre forward, to Stade Brest, and of course Jordan Burkhardt left for Frankfurt for 21 million euros. Players they brought in: Konstantin Schopp from Sturm Graz second team, who's 19-year-old centre back. Sota Kawasaki from Kyoto Sanga, who's on loan with a fee attached, so probably there's some sort of clause in there for a long-term deal. Cassie Boss has joined from Melbourne Victory for 500k. He's a left back. He's 21 years old. But the only real big deal man they've made is Benedict Hollerbach for 10 million euros. Now, I think this is a perfect example of why we're doing that. Why this is different from our kind of Bundesliga predictions or ranking the squads, because I think Mainz will do perfectly well this season, but I think they've done basically nothing in the window. And as Flipside says in the chat there, Burkhardt to Hollerbach is such a downgrade. So I'm quite content.
20 goals this year.
Yeah, well, maybe. I mean, he works very. I think this is the thing. I think I said when we talked about Union Berlin, I think Hollerbach's a perfectly good player, but I don't think he's Jonathan Burkhardt. So I'm going to say Mainz D for this one. I'm afraid.
I'm good with that.
All right, cool. Well, we'll keep going then.
Very nice and easy because we need more time for this next one.
Yeah, we have still got like 4 or 5 of the big clubs to go through, and we're already, I think, on an hour now. I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, this will be a Mad Ford classic.
Yeah. God, thank God Matt's not here. I'd have to call in sick tomorrow for work. Okay, well, I'll tell you what, I'll probably need about 20 minutes just to rhyme off all the players that Leipzig have signed this season. I'll start with the departures quickly. Obviously, Benjamin Sesko left on Friday or Saturday, sorry. So yesterday actually to Man United. Moriba left for Celta Vigo. Josef Poulsen obviously moved to Hamburg. And there's a few other players who moved on loan, which isn't really relevant. Players they've signed: Diomande from Leganes for 20 million euros. Vermeeren made his deal permanent for 20 million euros from Atletico Madrid. Bakayako signed for 18 million euros from PSV. Bunzuzi has signed from Leuven for Belgium. I think it's Leuven. Maximovic signed from Red Star for 14 million euros. And Finn Graffa, the left back from Köln, has joined. Manu, I'll let you jump in here. Kills had said a 5-star run times. There we go. Yeah, don't say we're not giving you guys your money's worth. Starting the season off with a bang. But yeah, Leipzig, a lot of money spent, a lot of players brought in. Let's deduce what we think of those players that they've signed.
Yeah, and then Harvey Elliott could just still join, right? I reported that for Transfermarkt. That they're in talks. He's supposedly the Harvey Simmons replacement when that goes through, supposedly, to Chelsea. But yeah, I mean, this is a long list of good players. And then the question is, of course, like, how are these players going to meet the expectations that the scouts have in them, right? Diomande is an extremely interesting name. It's a player actually I want to do a profile on because he spent some time in America playing for an academy there. Bakayoko, a player who's definitely a project, up and down. Banzuzi, half the Bundesliga was interested in him at one point. Really good player, really good central midfielder. They need that because they need someone to replace Haidara. Andre Maximovic, another attacking midfielder, so I'm not sure if like Harvey Elliott also comes in, if Maximovic or Elliott is going to be the Simmons replacement. I guess we'll have to wait and see, but you can always have more depth. Finn Grefe is going to be back up for who's the left back that they have there? David Raum. That was always planned to have another left back there. Like positionally, they hitting all the right notes. The question is, of course, can these players reach the potential that they have, without a doubt? Every single one of these players that they signed are your wonder kids that you would get Football Manager, right?
That is
100% certain. They're
absolutely playing Football Manager right now, aren't they?
Yeah.
But that's what Leipzig always do.
And I like them. I like every single one of these signings. There's some that I like more. Bakayoko, I'm kind of worried about. I think Maximovic is going to be an absolute superstar. I think Banzuzi is going to be incredible. Diomande a little bit like Oliver Burke at the time. Remember that? Like very raw.
Mm,
Um,
mm.
but yeah, I mean, if they all work out, we'll probably can put them in the S tier. But that's a big if.
Oh
Is
yeah,
what
I
I'm
mean,
saying.
if we were making a list of clubs with the most potential, then obviously Leipzig would
Yeah.
be very high up. That I think. I guess we're kind of bending the rules here about Leipzig because we're. I think we probably have to rate them here based on the assumption that Xavi Simons will leave the club
Yeah.
and the maybe not. I wouldn't go so far as say assume that Harvey Elliott will join the club, but the fact that they probably will sign either him or someone like that.
Yeah.
But obviously, living Sesko and Xavi Simons is huge. I think Xavi Simons way more so than Sesko, even though
That
Simons
Jasko
has been
deal
getting
is
a
so
lot.
good. I mean, that's
Yeah,
a masterclass in negotiation.
yeah,
So much
yeah,
money.
absolutely. But as we talked about on the bonus show last week, they've got a pender there. They
Yeah.
Sesko, I don't think will be a huge miss. I don't think it'll be as nearly as big a miss as Xavi Simons,
No.
who even though he probably didn't have a standout season last year, was still without a doubt leagues ahead of the rest of the players in that team in
Mhm.
terms of creating chances in that team. And I look through the players that they've signed, and by all means, maybe Banzuzi can be a decent player. By all means, maybe Diomande can develop into a great winger. Maximovic looks like a great prospect. Um, but it's like the Bayern thing. We're kind of hoping and praying that these young players can fill in for the stars that have kind of moved on from the club. Um, so you know, and I don't know, man. I think this is actually probably one of the toughest ones to call,
I
actually,
would say it's
because
a C. They did the homework. They did what Leipzig always do.
yeah, I was tempted to go D, but I think I'll probably go C as well because I think they have picked up a lot of really good players there. I'm really excited to see what Fingrafa can do. I'm really excited to see what Maximovic can do.
Yeah.
The interesting one there on that list, who I think really still has a lot to prove, is Vermeeren. I just don't think he really got going last season.
Yeah.
So if he can kind of obviously come on leaps and bounds, then I think he'll do well. I'll just jump in quickly. Some chat. Flipsco says I think the thing is, Leipzig's acquisitions aren't even that bad. It's just that their outgoings are so crushed from a squad that was already underperforming. Yeah, it's a great point.
Yeah, but
But
if you're losing players that are underperforming, is that a bad thing?
yeah, Jake says Klopp hasn't gotten his RB wings yet. Um,
That's a good
I
one.
think I think that the interesting thing is I think Ole Werner coming as a new head coach. It might be a bit of a blessing in disguise to move on guys like Xavi Simons and Sesko and just say like I want the guys who want to stay here to build the squad going forward and
Mhm.
got a whole bunch of young players there who they could obviously build that team around. Bakayoko, who I haven't even mentioned actually, could become a great player in the
Yeah.
Bundesliga. He's done really well in the Eredivisie. They picked him up for a great price, which is really interesting. But yeah, okay, I'll go with C. I think that's
She's
fair.
good. Yeah.
Right, Freiburg, who I wrote a piece on him not that long ago, Manu, saying the way that they're looking to rebuild their squad. We knew Ritsu Doan was moving on, and they've been given basically the whole summer to find replacements for him, and that's exactly what they've done. They picked up Yuto
Yeah.
Suzuki from Bromby, who did really well there as attacking midfielder. Sirik Iri, they picked up from Troyes, right winger, who's had really good stats. Matanovic, who I'm a big kind of fan of, even though
Mhm.
things didn't work out for him at Frankfurt. Philip Trieu, who right back from St. Pauli, who did very well. And Derry Sherhunt, who they picked up from Hertha Berlin, who had a really good season at Hertha despite the Bundesliga last year, left winger. I think Freiburg have had a pretty solid window, to be honest with you. In terms of the players that moved on, I should probably say Ritsu Doan, obviously sold's a big one, who we have to kind of talk about. Sildila, obviously the right back, moved on to PSV for €6 million. Kenneth Schmidt moved to Dusseldorf for 400k.
Mhm.
And I think that's more or less it, to be honest, except for a few young players moving on loan.
Yeah.
Freiburg knew they were going to have to sell Ritsu Doan. It's been talked about since like February or something. And I think they went out and did their homework and they picked up 3 or 4 attacking players who could do a really good job there.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, I think that squad, and this is how we probably should be rating this. Has this squad gotten better or worse of the window? And I think the squad has gotten better. So
Yeah, I agree.
I'm tempted to put Freiburg as an A.
Yeah, I can go with that. I love Suzuki as a pickup. Iri too, great player. Massive talent. Droy
Cool.
too. Matanovic you mentioned. I'm happy to
Cool.
put him in an A.
Easy peasy then. Guys can let us know in the chat what you guys think. But Freiburg doing Freiburg things, they're not going to rock the boat too hard. And yeah, it'd be interesting to see. Werder Bremen, Manu. An interesting club. And I think obviously there's a whole lot of talk about them in terms of moving Ole Werner on, who he claimed he left the club. Well, actually, no, the other way around. I think the club said he left, but it's more or less a dispute over the fact he didn't want to stay, perhaps. But there's a lot of rumblings that they want to bring in young players. He moves on, and sure enough, they go out and sign Samu Bangula from Juventus for not a club record, but I can't remember what we said at the time. It was the
biggest
most
since Klaassen.
Yeah, so was that like 7 or 8 seasons, maybe?
2017.
Yeah. So they basically spent all their money on one left winger. Marvin Duksch has moved on, who we talked about in the bonus show. Konaki has moved on to Hertha Berlin. Anthony Young, centre backs, moved on to Freiburg. And Nankishi has moved on to Stuttgart. Oliver Burkhoff's moved on to Union Berlin. And they lost Vekovic to Red Star Belgrade, who left on free transfer as well. I got to be honest, I had a lot of time for Werder Bremen last season. I'm looking forward to going to some of their games in a couple of weeks. But I thought they were a squad that were kind of held together by Ole Werner and his tactics, in the same way that like Mainz are, the same way that who did we talk about before that? Maybe was it maybe St. Pauli? No, sorry, Heidenheim. And the fact that they moved Ole Werner on, and there's always talk about how the club wanted to get younger, they want to bring in younger new players, and the fact that they've only made one signing is an interesting one. I know you're really hot for Bangula, and I think you think he's a great player, but I don't think one left winger is enough to kind of fix that squad. Not to say that it needs hugely amount of fixing, because they did very well, but I think a lot of that was down to Ole Werner's tactics. But I do know that a lot of Werder Bremen fans were crazy about Werner, so we'll probably get some in the chat saying, no, it's because our squad was good, and fair enough, that's your prerogative. But I don't know. I'm just quite surprised at the lack of movement, to be honest with you.
Yeah, so Mbangula on its own is not enough. There's no doubt about it. I think the biggest star signing for them, other than Mbangula, is Horst Steffen. Great coach, fantastic. But right now, I don't think the business has been good enough. They need to get better. They need another striker. You can't rely on hope that Keke Top is going to make that step and fill in for Marvin Duksch. It's not looking great. I would put them. I'm actually almost tempted to put them into the Augsburg category here, Stefan.
Yeah, I'm not 100% against that either, because another thing as well is that there's a lot of talk. There's been this persistent talk of Romano Schmidt leaving the club this summer, potentially selling him, who I think would be a huge mistake. They put so much kind of hope in these guys like Keke Top and Yinma, who obviously played a bit part role last season. But I mean, the guy's 24 years old. It's not as if he's like some 17-year-old who's breaking through the first team. And yeah, I'm probably agree with you there. Actually, I'm happy to go with an F there. I don't think they've done enough. No. There's of course, Manu. There's of course this whole thing that they've got a new head coach in. They do have a big squad, so I'll give them that. Maybe Horst Steffen's just looked at it and said, "I've got enough to work with here. I don't need any huge signings." But yeah, I think as we kind of look at that team, we haven't even mentioned the fact that they lost Marvin Duksch, which we talked about in the bonus show, was maybe a good time for him to move on, because he was this kind of like journeyman who came through the ranks with them, and he was like, he embodied Bremen's ability to kind of win promotion, avoid relegation, become this mid-table club, because he was the guy scoring and creating those goals for him. He's now at an age now where they maybe can't rely on him going forward, and he wants one big move, so he's obviously he's obviously accepted a paycheck from Tom Brady and said, "I'm going to give this a go." But even just that alone, the fact that they haven't even really made any effort to replace him makes me think, yeah, the squad's not as good as it was last season based on the transfers. So yeah, F. We're getting a bit more ruthless here. I like it. Right. Stuttgart, an interesting one as well. a club who obviously a lot can still change. They've been linked. Nick Voltemada's the big one that's been linked with a lot of moves, but we've also sold a lot of players, Manu, which is often what Stuttgart often do. Enzo Milo, the big one, who moved on to Saudi Arabia, deal that I'm not terribly happy with because I thought it was a great player, but okay. Wu Young, who's moved on to Union Berlin, who we talked about. Jacob Brun Larsen's moved to Burnley. Henry Chase has left for Salzburg. Luca Raymond has moved on to Dusseldorf, and a few other loan deals, etc., etc. Players they've picked up: Lorenz Assignon from Stade Ron. They love a French right back. They absolutely love, or a French defender. Lazar Jovanovic from Red Star, 18-year-old right winger. Shemi Andres from Castilla, the the Real Madrid second team, and Noah Darvic from the Barcelona academy. Darvic, Manu, probably the most notable name for fans of German football.
Yeah.
An interesting one, obviously, to keep an eye on. Can maybe make an argument that also Jovanovic, who comes from Red Star, comes with some interesting kind of, did perfectly well at his previous clubs as well. Very young kind of winger, could do quite well for them. But I don't know, Manu. Do you think Stuttgart are maybe waiting to do some business before the end of the window here, because they're currently sitting with about 17 million euros in profit in this window, and obviously Voltemade is the main one who could potentially still move. I don't think we can really worry about Angel Stiller because he's got that injury, but it's I don't know. It's a big squad. And I don't know what have you made of the window? It's I guess it's a lot still hangs, shall we say, in the balance.
It is, because like we don't know how firm the stance is with Voltemade, right? And that can change a lot of things. Milo, I think the expectations were that he was going to leave. They got the transfer fee that they wanted. I'm disappointed by his choice. But that's his decision, if you are willing to go to the Middle East at this time of your career, that's up to you. Probably see him in Turkey in about half a season. That seems to be the current course of action. And I think that they're planning to replace him. There's been on and off talks with Nuremberg for Kasper Janda. Nuremberg, of course, a club that has done really well selling players in recent months, right? Getting big transfer fees for the young talented players, and they're asking for a big fee here, 15 million euros. Stuttgart haven't really quite found a solution in that regard yet, but Ayanda would be a really good addition to the squad, and another young player to work with Sebastian Hoeneß. Finn Jelch, of course, came in from Nuremberg, right, and did really well right away, a young defender. But I think there's a lot of things still kind of in the balance in what they want to do and how they want to add players. Noah Darvic, if he can hit his potential, that's an instant star. They did quite well keeping Dennis Undav, Emedin Demovic. If Nick Voltemade stays, do you really need to do much else in the attack there? Probably not, right? Because he can play so many different roles. But so much I think depends still on one or two movements. Voltemade, is he going to stay? Is he going to leave? Janda, is he coming in? But overall, I think it's a solid window for Stuttgart. Didn't lose anyone that didn't want to lose. I think Enzo Milo was always planned to be moved on. So, yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of like middle of the pack here, see?
Yeah, interesting. I mean, I think the thing about Stuttgart is that they did lose Enzo Milo, who's a big name for them. They could still lose Voltemade, which we can't really judge them on right now. It's not like it's set in stone by any means. In fact, it's more likely that he'll probably stay at the club at this point. But and you could definitely see someone like Noah Darvic just kind of moving into that role that Enzo Milo's left behind. Yeah. But I don't know. I think on paper they've actually gotten worse in this window, to be honest with you, just because I just rate Enzo Milo so highly that I think he's going to be a big miss for them. So I was thinking D, but I'd probably be happy to say C if you are quite, and I do accept that they have picked up 3 or 4 really young players, so I'll give them credit for that. But I don't know. They've got such a big squad that you can understand why they haven't made any signings yet. And obviously, they know what they're doing over there in terms of that squad because they've got a great head coach and they tend to be on top of a lot of things right now. And they're now in a position where they can pick and choose what players they sell. And maybe that's a good way to look at it. Usually, they do lose 3 or 4 big names, but they've only lost Enzo Milo here. So, okay, yeah, C works for me. I think I've kind of convinced myself they haven't sold too many big players. So, in terms of Stuttgart, I'd say it's a good window. Okay, yeah, we'll go C then.
Really curious to see them next week at the Super Cup.
Yeah, Flipsicle says I'd give them a D if they lose Voldemort, which I think is fair, but we can't really judge them just on that.
I mean, if you
yet.
hang on to Voldemort and you fight off that Bayern interest, that is almost like an additional transfer.
Yeah, question is should they? Because can you get is lightning going to strike twice there? But that's a question for a proper preview show. Wolfsburg, a club who are very much not the kind of antithesis of Stuttgart right now. I would say actually in the sense that they're a bit all over the place. Wolfsburg doing Wolfsburg things. They've let go of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 players. Sebastian Borno, the centre back's probably the biggest one. He moved to Leeds for €6 million. Cedric Ziziger moved to Augsburg for €4 million. Kevin Behrens is left. Nemcha's left. Not a huge amount of players moving on, really, I would say. Just obviously the central defender is an interesting one. Players they've signed. Vinny Souza from Sheffield United for €50 million. They obviously picked up I'm having Amura on a full-time permanent deal. Aaron Zetner, 20-year-old from Paderborn, left winger. Dennis Favreau they picked up from Copenhagen. There's a surprise, Manu. Jesper Lindstrom, he's probably one of the most interesting ones who they picked up for loan. I don't know if that the Lindstrom deal comes with a release clause in it or not. Maybe, I don't know if you know.
Just looking. I think we reported this.
Yeah, but probably
comes with an option to buy.
It comes with an option to buy. Okay, yeah. Well, okay, that's an interesting one. Paul Simones is probably the big one. Obviously, replace Ralf Hasenhüttl. It's. I feel like with Wolfsburg, the problem has never really been the players that they sign. It feels like every window they pick up some decent signings, especially in recent years. They've kind of obviously gotten over Dieselgate. They can actually spend a bit of money now without Volkswagen kind of slapping them on the wrist. And, they've obviously got this sporting director from Copenhagen who's, shall we say, making a very strong kind of Danish impression at the club, Peter Christensen, who's been there since last summer. I think I'd probably say decent signings, Manu. I think, for example, I think Aaron Zetner joins the club with a really interesting kind of background. He did really, really well for Paderborn in the Zweite Bundesliga last season, picked up a lot of assists. Jesper Lindstrom, example, is another one. Player who we know can do a very, very good job in the Bundesliga. Did really well at Frankfurt, I thought. A bit underrated at Frankfurt, to be perfectly honest with you. And then, of course, just getting a move over the line. I don't know if that technically counts as a summer move, but getting him over the line, big deal for them as well. I'm going to say, technically speaking, I think they've improved the squad this summer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would go along with that. I love the Lindstrom signing. I think he's a really good player.
Should we just call it then? So I would say maybe a B.
Yeah, I'd be happy with that. I'm also curious to see if Amuro ends up staying. Or if a very smart Bundesliga club comes in and buys him for a lot of money.
Yeah, I think I feel like a lot of European clubs haven't quite kind of caught on to him yet in terms of but really if he does as well this season as he did obviously the second half last season or mostly that last season, then it's only a matter of time. But yeah, we'll go for a B for Wolfsburg. Bayer Leverkusen, an interesting one. Might split opinion here. Obviously sold a lot of players. Let me just pick up here. They have made an absolute fortune. Florian Wirtz left, Jeremy Frimpong left, Kosunu left, Granit Xhaka left, Puerta left for Hull City, Herdecki moved on from Monaco, Jonathan Tah left for Bayern Munich. And in the place of them, Mark Tillman's joined the club, Kwanzaa's joined the club, Ibrahim Matza joined from Hertha Berlin, Mark Flecken joined from Brentford, Kofani, young centre forward, has joined from Albacete, Faye's joined from Häcken in Sweden, Tim Ormans joined from Bochum, and a few other ones as well. Alpha Ruprecht joined from Man City's youth team, and Axel Tapa has joined from PSG's youth team as well. We've spent a lot of time talking about Leverkusen this summer because they've taken up a lot of the room in this transfer window. My 2 cents, Manu, is I think they've done very well to respond to the players who had to leave, as in Jonathan Tah, Hradecky, and they've done well to respond to players that they expect to leave, like Wirtz and Frimpong. Granit Xhaka was unexpected, but I don't think he's a huge miss in the set, which sounds silly because he's obviously like been the huge player for them. But I thought he was really beginning to look his age last season, and I think that squad's going to be just fine. But I just don't think I can sit here seriously and say, yeah, Tillman's going to make up for Wirtz leaving, Ibrahim Matza is going to make up for Granit Xhaka or whatever, Kwanzaa's going to make up for Jonathan Tah, Flecken's maybe I can say Flecken will make up for Hradecky leaving, because I was never a huge Hradecky fan myself, but. Yeah. I think on paper, that squad's gotten worse. And I just don't think there's a huge argument to say otherwise.
No, I mean, how can you get better if you lose Florian Wirtz and Frimpong, right?
Yeah.
Did they overpay for? Yeah, so that's Flipsicle said his opinion. They have overpaid a bit for Kwanzaa.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's the Liverpool tax, right?
Yeah. Well, they overpaid for Kwanzaa because if he does well, he'll end up at Crystal Palace for like 60 million euros, or Liverpool send him back.
Right? So
yeah, they got a buyback, so they'll make a profit.
Who,
Who, by the way, I think is a very good player, Kwanzaa. I think he is. Shuri Casks, who will play that Frimpong role.
What is just signed Akpo from the Netherlands, right? Poco, sorry, from the Netherlands. That deal is not registered on Transfermarkt yet, but it's about to go through.
Yeah, they've got Arthur as well, who did a decent job of it last year as well.
So,
but they've also got a new head coach in Ten Hag, who we even mentioned. But in terms of which we obviously have to mention because the tactics will change. I don't think they will play with out-and-out wing backs like they did last season. I know they still got Grimaldo on that team, but he's probably more a traditional left back as well. So they'll probably go back to more kind of standard 4-4-3, I'd say maybe. But yeah, I don't know. I'm thinking C or D here, Manu. I don't know if D's too harsh, but I'm not sure.
What do you make of those like really poor performances in the friendlies? Do we worry about that or do we not care?
Do you mean against the under 12 or something? They played in Brazil
against Chelsea.
I don't pay attention to friendlies, so I really couldn't care less. But I mean, I think if we're marking down clubs like Leipzig and Leipzig I guess is the most obvious ones. Maybe Stuttgart for bringing in youth players and hoping they'll make the difference. We kind of have to look at guys like Matza and say, well, can they make the step up? I mean, I think there's a huge expectation on Tillman and Kwanzaa, Flecken as well, I suppose, because he'll go into that team straight away as one of the kind of more senior players, to be perfectly honest with you.
So Flecken is an upgrade, right? Like, he's 100%
Flecken is an upgrade, yeah.
In defense, I think Kwanzaa could be an upgrade over Tah.
Yeah.
Then we have to see how good Poco is. Tillman is a good player, but he's not as good. He's not as good as Wirtz. No one is. In the attack, otherwise they didn't really lose that much.
Yeah, but this is why I said I was like they've done as well as they possibly could have done to deal with the circumstance they dealt with. But no club in Europe can replace Florian Wirtz, really. Kilzig said, so far we've talked about Stuttgart and Leverkusen looking slightly worse, but you all still don't think Bayern will walk
because
the league.
Bayern got worse.
I also don't think we specifically said they won't walk the league. That's for a different podcast. We'll do a prediction podcast in a later show. But and Flipsco says, I think Kwanzaa is one of the better signings as well. I think I back Tillman to do well, but I'd be surprised if Leverkusen finished any higher than fourth this season. And obviously people are chatting about the Chelsea friendly. I don't really care about friendlies. I really don't. But I think they've got a lot of players who have to step up for potentially world class players that have left, and they've got a head coach there who's got a lot to prove as well as a head coach at the top level. So I think, like, if when we move on to talk about our actual predictions and how we think the squad will do, I think I'll have a very different approach to this. But in terms of the actual transfer window, I'd probably say
Or do you want to go higher?
I'm tempted to put a D, Manu, but I don't know if that's harsh. Yeah, maybe a C actually. I think D's maybe harsh.
I think they did what they needed to do, considering what they were.
Yeah, it's an impossible situation. It's an impossible situation, but still, that squad has gotten worse, I would say. So I'm going to go for.
You lost Wirtz. I mean, like,
yeah.
Like that's just that's so hard to replace.
Yeah. So we're saying a C.
Yeah, a C is fair.
Okay, cool.
And this is all right. Dortmund.
B. An interesting club as well. So obviously we just had someone in the chat saying, "Why don't you think Bayern are going to walk to the title?" Here's why. Niko Kovac revolution rumbles on at the Westfalenstadion. Dortmund, who of course sold Makuku to Copenhagen. Gosh, remember that name. Koulibaly moved to Strasbourg for 8 million euros, but of course the big one's Jamie Gittins moved for 56 million euros. Joe Bellingham joined the club for 30 million euros. Jan Kutu joined for 20 million euros. That deal finally got over the line. Daniel Svensson joined on a permanent deal. After being on loan for 6.5 million euros, and that's it. That's all Dortmund have done this summer.
But they're not done. They're not finished.
No, they're not finished. But that's all they've done so far. And I've got to say, Manu, I think on the whole, I think they've done well. And I'll tell you why. I just don't think they're going to miss Jamie Gittins.
Agree.
Which is a weird thing to say because he's like this 20-year-old who will probably, get Chelsea fans very excited. But I don't think they'll miss him. I think if this was a case of them losing Maximilian Bayer or Karim Adeyemi, or maybe Guirassy if someone came in for Guirassy. Jake said they've signed more appliances than players. Kilzig said Joe Bellingham at centre back. Let's go. They probably do need to still sign some central defenders. I think that's a fair point. But I'd say on the whole, I mean, I remember writing a piece at the start of the window saying, they kind of got these deals over the line very quickly. Joe Bellingham obviously comes in with a pretty obvious role. They need someone in there in the middle of the park. I think for the most part, Dortmund probably didn't need a huge amount of changes to that squad. I think they just needed a bit of stability, needed a head coach and get the best out of the players they already had. And I think obviously Niko Kovac kind of did something, proved that to some degree. But we've had quite a lot of people in the chat now. Kahn, Sula, and Schotterbeck injured is critical. Of course.
Schotterbeck is coming back. And, so here's the thing with Dortmund. I think their transfer window so far has been really quiet, and I think they're not done. So I would actually say they're probably just a C for me. But I think they actually had a really good transfer window last year. And it's just that they signed a terrible coach to go with a really good transfer window.
Flipsicle said Dortmund so stretched that centre back Hummels was playing for them today.
It was a retirement game. It was his retirement game. Come on, testimonial. Give the man some respect. No, but I think Dortmund had a really good squad last year, and I think in that stretch that after Kovac took over, they were like almost even on points of Bayern Munich during that period, right?
Yeah.
I think they have the right coach for the right squad now, and if they do one or two more key transfers, I think they're really good. But I think in the moment I would give them a C, but I think that's all they needed to do because their biggest problem was on the bench and not on the field.
I'm actually tempted to go a bit higher, Manu, just because they've also haven't really sold any key players. Obviously, they've sold Gittins, which I know people who maybe don't follow the Bundesliga will think, what you guys talking about? They've lost one of the best wingers that I've ever, one of the most useful players in FIFA or something like that. He's a total FIFA player, I suppose. But I just don't think he's a huge loss from that regard. It's a shame that Duranville's picked up an injury because I thought he could have been a good step in for them.
Yeah.
But he's obviously picked up an injury. It's not a serious one. I think he's out for 2 or 3 months. But, the fact that Gregor Kobel's still there, I think is a big deal. I think Anton's going to continue improving in that middle park. Schlotterbeck also come back to well. Daniel Svensson was such a great signing mid-season last year. They picked him up at a proper deal. You know, even and then obviously Bellingham in there with Nemcha, potentially a really solid dynamic team there. Yeah, okay, they've still got guys like Oz Chan, and I'm not crazy about Emery Chan either. And you could maybe argue that there's still this kind of weird mix of like they don't really have a proper number 10. They've got Gio Reyna and Julian Brandt sitting there like two wallflowers, but
there's a 10 coming.
But yeah, possibly, yeah, absolutely. I think I'm honestly tempted to say a B for Bayern, for Dortmund, because I think they haven't spent a lot of money, but I think Bellingham's a decent signing. They picked up Svensson on the full-time deal. They haven't lost any key players yet. That could all change. Obviously it could change, but I think they're going into that squad. I think that squad's going in looking better than it did at the start of the transfer window, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I'm happy with B. You know my opinion about Dortmund. I think they're going to be very dangerous next year.
Yeah, Sharik says they solid midfield, but they lack defensive depth. Yeah, they probably should bring in a central defender. I don't disagree with that.
Yeah.
But although what I would say is that last season Kovac did start playing Benzemaini as a centre half, where I actually thought he played much better, as opposed to left back because they've got Svensson there now. So Benzemaini technically could cover there, but we'll see what happens there. But I'm quite content going for a B there. And then we move on to the one club, probably the most boring club actually, in terms of transfers this summer, to wrap things up.
Well,
and of course,
not really. There's some interesting names in there.
Oh, really? Okay. Yeah, Tor says they did at least spend 11 million euros on a kitchen. At least that's Dortmund, of course. I don't know if you saw the story, Manu. Dortmund renovated their canteen. I think
that was necessary. I've been in there. You will not go on the media trip that you're doing. You'll probably miss the canteen. I've been to the old one. It was necessary to fix it.
Yeah, no, fair enough.
Well spent.
I know I've been to Dortmund before. I don't remember worrying about the canteen, to be honest with you, but
horrendous.
It's an old stadium. But Jason says can always rely on you guys to make me feel better about BVB.
Well, we haven't really in a while. Like last year, we were right. We weren't really big, but I'm actually really big on Dortmund this year. I actually genuinely am.
It's either Dortmund or Leipzig. One of them always gets you. But yeah, moving on to Gladbach, kicking things off. Flipsco said losing Itakura's big. Kilzik says Shuto Machino slander. I'll quickly run through the players they picked up. Shuto Machino, they signed from 8 million euros from Holstein Kiel. Jens Kastrop from Nuremberg, excuse me, young centre midfielder for 4.5 million euros. And in terms of, I'm trying to think who else they picked up. They picked up Kevin Deeks, the right back from Copenhagen. And Ko Itakura's obviously moved on to Ajax. Alsan Players moved on to PSV. Stefan Leiner moved on for free to Salzburg. I think that's about it, really, to be honest with you. Now I should probably kind of backstep a bit, Manu, because I did actually say write a newsletter I think last month saying and Jens Kastrop was one of the players that I mentioned saying
such a good sign.
Potential really top Bundesliga player in the making there. You'll know probably more than me because you've been watching a bit of Nuremberg last season in Zweite Bundesliga, but Jens Kastrop, potential really, really big Bundesliga player. I think great talent. And obviously, Makino obviously did perfectly well last season as well. Did really well for a really poor Holstein Kiel side. So we'll see. You could maybe make an argument that like Makino potentially Kleindienst Mark II, picking up a player from a relegation team who could do really well. But yeah, okay, I may stand corrected here. Maybe I spoke too soon on Gladbach.
Yeah, I love the Machido signing. He's a great player. He was a standout player in a really poor Holstein Kiel side. We spoke about him a few times, and a lot of Bundesliga clubs wanted him. Gladbach did really well to get him, especially because Kleindienst I think he's starting the season injured, right? So you needed that attacking depth. That's why they picked up Tapakovic on loan from Hoffenheim as a backup. Kastrop is another one. Nuremberg is becoming this crazy talent development team in the zweite Bundesliga. They're just churning out amazing players. We spoke about Kasper Janda and his links to Stuttgart and whether that's going to go through or not. But Gladbach got the other midfielder that Nuremberg produced last season in Kastrop. Great player. Probably going to be a national team player down the road. Has an enormous potential. I like Gladbach's business. I think they didn't have to do much. They had to keep players. With the exception, the one thing that hurts is Itakuro leaving, but they knew that was going to happen. I would have loved to keep Itakuro in the Bundesliga. I know Dortmund were interested. I think that Frankfurt were interested as well. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. He's going to Ajax, which, that tells you everything you need to know. Ajax pick up ball playing center backs as quickly as they can because that's just the style of football that they play. I think a lot of teams will rue the fact that they've missed out on Itakuro. It's a big loss, without a doubt, but I do love the players that they've brought in. And I actually think maybe low key one of the best transfer windows in the Bundesliga, Stefan.
Yeah, I agree. I think the players they brought in are great to a man, more or less. Kevin Duke's a great player from Copenhagen. Makino, I think, comes in as a much needed kind of potential replacement for Kleindienst, who they were so over reliant on last season. Understandably so, because he's done so well. But just to have another player there that can score goals, I think is a huge deal for them. And I think Jan Kastrop is a player who I don't think he'll spend a huge amount of time there. Even read reports that Florian Neuhaus has kind of made up with the club and he even might get back into the first team. So he could be a quote unquote like a new signing, as they say. That old horrible expression. Had they not sold Itakura, I think you'd be looking at an A or a B here. But they have, and they've got like three central defenders on the books right now, which is a worry. And if it was any other squad, I'd say they might be able to kind of work around it. But Gerardo Siona hasn't really been incredibly inspirational last season with that squad, and I feel like they might be a bit top heavy next season. Maybe someone like Julian Weigl can kind of move into a centre back role. Who knows? Maybe Joe Skelly can reinvent himself.
Fabi Chirarodia, who they picked up from Werder Bremen a couple of years ago, is considered a really big talent in centre back. He desperately needs playing time.
So I mean, where do you sit on this? I'm tempted to go. I feel like it's so boring going with another C, but that's probably C or B is probably where I'm thinking for Gladbach.
Yeah, I was thinking the same too between C or B. And maybe another defender will kind of push it over the line.
But I'm thinking C just because the Itakura thing, and if they bring in a centre defender, then by all means. But I don't think. I think Itakura leaving brings them down a rung, and I don't think they were an A to begin with. So I would have said they were a B, but losing Itakura takes them down to a C.
Yeah, with the caveat or like the asterisk that if they bring in a good centre back, I'm happy to say it's a B.
Yeah. All right, cool. Well, we'll go with C then, and that officially wraps up.
Interesting.
I don't know why we did an S tier. No one's done an S tier, which is interesting, but
I didn't see an S tier transfer window.
No, I don't think anyone's kind of had no one's had a Liverpool transfer window, put it that way.
Yeah, Liverpool would be an S. That was
Liverpool would definitely be an S.
That was incredible what they put together. Maybe Dortmund will surprise us at the end there. We'll see.
Yeah, maybe. But that's just coming up on an hour 45, so we should probably wrap it up, I think, Manu.
We should. Thank you for listening. If you listened live, good job on staying with us for the entire hour 45. And if you get through this mega podcast, listening back, you probably needed 2 or 3 days, which is just fine. All right, guys. We probably, before we go, maybe after this season, we can revisit and see who popped. I agree.
Yeah.
Great comment, Kilzik. We will definitely do that. And on that note, we're going to wrap it up. Auf Wiedersehen.